Our next speaker is Canadian-American violinist and composer Patrick Collon. Has been highly praised for both his artistry as a composer and his playing as a concert master, session musician, and soloist. A genre-busting musician in every sense of the word, Mr. Collon's compositions have been described as bridging the gap between classical music's ivory tower intellectualism and popular music's visceral sensualism. Harder for me to say, sorry. As a composer, Mr. Collon has written for and collaborated with such diverse groups as the Los Angeles New Music Ensemble, Arkansas Symphony, the Fort Smith Symphony, Oklahoma City Philharmonic, the Oklahoma Virtuosi, Race Dance Collective, Oklahoma Contemporary, and many, many others. He is the principal second violinist for the Fort Smith Symphony and performs regularly with the Lawton Philharmonic, Tulsa Symphony, and Oklahoma City Philharmonic. Through his company, Onyx Lane, he has been composing, arranging, and producing music for film, sound installations, live performances, and album recordings with work featured on numerous labels, and as an arranger, music producer, and score mixer on several movies, including most recently Montford the Chickasaw Ranger, just released and can be seen on Netflix starting the 1st of this month. Mr. Collon is currently the Assistant Director of the Academy of Contemporary Music at the University of Central Oklahoma and teaches courses in film scoring, studio recording, and composition. Please welcome Patrick to the stage.
Thank you so much. I did not realize they were going to read my entire bio. I apologize for all 3 paragraphs. Thank you so much for having me here. I am honored to be part of such an incredible group of presenters discussing such an important topic. So hello to all of you. I'm Patrick Conlon. I'm the Assistant Director at ACM at UCO here at the University of Central Oklahoma, and Onyx Lane is my night job, my day job and night job. They're the 2 worlds I spend most of my time in. So here at UCO, half my time is as an administrator, working to make sure my faculty have what they need to do their best work, and the rest of my time is spent making sure my students have what they need to succeed and thrive in the music industry. And at Onyx Lane, like all the things that were said, working in music mostly on big collaborative projects, so films, art installations, recordings, all of those things. And in both of these roles, I get to collaborate with brilliant, artistic, unique humans who constantly encourage, challenge, and drive me to be a better person. So what I want to use this platform to do is to talk about some of the incredible collaborators I've been fortunate enough to work here in Oklahoma with, and how I try to be worthy of getting to continue working with them and getting to be a small part of showcasing their talent in this state. So before I introduce them, I want to share my own personal mantra. Oh, there's collaboration is power. That's kind of the thing I'm doing with this one. So don't virtue signal, just be virtuous. So what is virtue signaling? So this is the dictionary definition. The way I like to think about it is virtue signaling is when someone is more concerned with taking credit for doing good than they are with actually being good. And so we all do this to some extent. There's psychological studies about it. We want credit for the work we do. We want people to think that we're kind and generous and successful. We want people to think that, you know, if you've ever seen a model, they always stand like this. It's been, you know, shown that it makes your stomach look smaller. So whenever I see a picture, you can tell who's actually been trained to do it because their front leg goes in front of them. We all do this. We want to look good in front of other people. I also do this. Frankly, 3 of the main reasons I got into the performing arts is I love the spotlight, I love compliments, and I love applause. I was like 10. There's actually a video of me when I was 4, and it's one of those little, I'm Canadian, so this was back in Ottawa. It's one of those little, all the 4-year-olds are kind of standing here, and this is like the entire choreography for the piece. And we're singing some song, and there was a microphone positioned right here, and every time I got close, I would go like this and go up to the microphone and then go back into my line. We're singing like Frere Jacques, so it's just like, Frère Jacques, dormez-vous, dormez-vous, c'est la matina. So I think I was hooked young. But what I've found is that when I shift the spotlight away from myself and towards my collaborators, I receive something 1,000 times better than I ever could have imagined if I wanted to keep the focus on me. And so there's 2 simple rules that I follow in order to do this. Rule 1 is give people credit for the work they do. And this means legally, financially, this means in your marketing materials, this means how you talk to other people when you're talking about projects. If someone had something to do with it, give them credit for their work. And the second is to use my position and privilege to create space and give a platform for the people that I care about who might not otherwise get one. Those are kind of the 2 things that I hold as my rules and how I move forward. So I want to shift the spotlight away from me. First collaboration I want to talk about is Grand Entry Medley. So in 2019, my artistic partner Christina and I were asked if we could help put together a piece for the Oklahoma City Philharmonic that showcased some of the incredible traditional Native American musicians in the state. We were asked because Christina's a specialist in Native American music and how it interfaces with American popular and classical music. She actually has some great articles on what she calls singing red face, and it's basically how popular music co-ops Native work. That's the same things that blackface minstrelsy did, but towards Native Americans, and it's everywhere in the United States. Sports teams are a particular topic the last 10 or 100 years. So she also runs the Ruggles Native American Music Series at OU, and we actually had an incredible concert last night with composer Jared and Pichichaha Tate and choreographer Maggie Boyette. You need to check their stuff out. They are 2 of the monster talents in our state right now. So for the Grand Entry project, the task is to figure out how can we showcase our indigenous friends and their songs in a symphonic setting that avoids the 600-year colonialist history of white people taking Native American songs and profiting off of it. So how can we do that? So the first thing is we were like, we are not composing this piece. We are arrangers writing backing parts for their music for them to use in a performance. This is not our piece, we're not writing it. And so we went, okay, how can we do that? So first we brought John Hamilton. He's an incredible Native American powwow singer, just awesome human being and someone who we'd worked with on films and on a bunch of stuff before. And so we said, hey, we got asked to do this project. Do you have any songs that you think might work? And so he mentioned his piece. It's an intertribal that he wrote for Gamma Delta Pi. It's the Native American sorority at OU. And he said, hey, this is an intertribal that I wrote. It's appropriate to use in the context that you're talking about. It's not a sacred work. It'll work really well in a commercial setting. And so we just said, cool, come on into the studio. We're going to record your piece. So after we recorded his song, imported it into Pro Tools, mapped out the piece, and just built the backing track around it. So I wasn't telling him, oh, can you take an extra measure there? Can you do this? It's like, you're the superstar. This is your piece. We will build a backing track around it. And so when it was performed, he played the piece and the orchestra accompanied him. So we viewed it like a concerto for powwow drum and for orchestra, or really the way I always thought about it in my head was like writing arrangements for a rock band. And so the orchestra's job is to amplify and accompany him, and our job is to write cool stuff for the orchestra to do behind his song. But like, if you get asked to do a Rolling Stones arrangement, you're not going to call up Mick Jagger and be like, hey, I like it, but can you extend the bridge like 8 measures? I mean, just like, I think that would be better. So that's how we approached it. And also the other big thing about this is because it's still his song, he is on the score, he is listed on all of the legal documents. When we got a second and third performance at the opening of the FAM Museum, they hired him to perform it again. And this also means that we cannot perform this song without his permission, because we view it as an incredible gift that John would share his song and trust us to arrange the orchestral parts for him. We wanted to honor that gift by basically having his back and making sure that legally, financially, and in marketing materials, it was clear this was still his song. And it's really important because John is like a super giving person. You know, he's one of those guys that he's just like, oh yeah, this will be great. And we're like, no, this industry's evil. We are going to make sure they're doing the right thing before we bring you in. And so one of the most powerful things that happened, and I want to share this kind of video with you, is Christina had the idea of just letting John do the first verse entirely by himself. And so also we had the Oklahoma Fancy Dancers, which this is really cool. So Cricket Conawordy, who's one of the main fancy dancers, and she runs that company, she used to babysit me when I first moved here. So she lived down the street from me, so like she and my mom were super tight, and I grew up with her, and she would babysit me. So it was so cool to do this project together. And the coolest thing about this is you think about a classical music concert, right? So there's like, it was a packed house, there's like 2,600 people or however many the Civic Center holds, in their best, you know, dress, and they've all had their champagne beforehand, and they're there to listen to like Brahms or Beethoven. And then they are all, well, I'm going to show it to you and then I'll tell you about it. And so that's just a really short clip of it, but if you can imagine like over 2,000 audience members totally enraptured with Native American traditional powwow music in a classical concert hall. And like as a classical musician, like we are one of the last great bastions of like Eurocentric white male power. I mean, like we are all fighting to tear it down, but it is like, it's, you know, there's a long history of everything with that genre. And it was the biggest and longest standing ovation I have ever experienced in my life. The audience was completely in. I mean, it was John's piece. We arranged a piece for Tim Neva Choir for Native Flute, and then the Native Praise Choir sang a version of Amazing Grace where they sang it in a bunch of their own native languages with different soloists. And it was like, that was the best piece I have ever been a part of. It's also the piece that I had the least creative control over. And so what I want to say is that when I get out of the way and create space for other people, I get to be part of artistic and cultural experiences I could never have imagined by myself. This is literally my favorite part of being a musician. And that's kind of that's sort of the point of this talk I want to talk about. So the next one I want to talk about, next project, we did a 41-minute collaborative visual album called Cube of Light. So there's basically, I was kind of thinking this is my less good version of Beyonce's Lemonade. So there's music videos for each one and then like a story that goes through the whole album. And you know, like when we were writing the grants, it was always like, oh yes, this interfaces with past classical works such as such as such. And in my head, I'm just like, I just want to do something like 1/10 as good as Lemonade. That is what I want to do. So we ended up, by the end of it, 42 other musicians, over 30 dancers, production staff of 10 people, 6 different choreographers. I mean, it just kept growing and including more people and kept getting better. So when the pandemic hit, this was originally an art exhibit that our dean, Charlene Weidel, had asked if Christina and I wanted to be a part of, and then it was slated for April of the year when the pandemic happened. So that's 2020, right? That was only 1 year ago. And anyone who hasn't checked out Oklahoma Contemporary, it's an awesome space. We did the opening for that one too, and their opening day was actually the day after the Thunder game. So we did like a big donor dinner, and we're like, welcome to the new opening, and then it was like, and we're going to push it off for 6 months. So it's incredible. They got a great video game exhibit right now. So when that happened, like everyone else in the entire world, everything shifted. So made a bunch of sourdough, did a bunch of puzzles, ran out of things to watch on Netflix, and then we kind of start to get back to work on it. And so For the past 8 years, I've been fortunate enough to work here at UCO with the incredible choreographer, teacher, and bastion of the arts, Hee Cha-Poos. And so we have been talking, yes, no, let's give her a round. Woo! So she is like the person in Oklahoma City. And we'd been talking about trying to do something together ever since I've gotten here. We're like, can we do this project together? And then it wouldn't work out. So since she is smarter, wiser, and more eloquent than me, I'm going to let her talk about the project rather than talk about it myself.
We're extremely grateful to have this opportunity because this came at a time when we were trying to figure out what next season looked like, and we didn't know. And so when Patrick and Christina approached us, we thought, hey, this is something we could use for the students to have a goal, for us to have something to present, but also for Race and UCO to be able to work together, and also the two companies within UCO. So it was strangely something that came together in this perfect puzzle that none of us really had to work extremely hard for, except for the music part of it. And I think once that happened and we saw that it could align, it just kind of did. I mean, we didn't have a lot of major hurdles. The music was there for the dancers. The dancers and Josh worked incredibly well together. He was divine in the way that he saw, and whatever I didn't foresee, he could fill those gaps in, and he could give the ideas for all of the choreographers to say, hey, what do you think about this? How do you think this would look? And he just was really open to the collaboration. And I think if I had to use one word to describe this project, it would be collaboration.
So I'm the one who's grateful for Hee Cha-Poos because she is the one who made this happen. We went to her and we went, hey, we got some funding to do some music videos. Do you want to be part of it? And then she was like, yes, and I'm going to drag in 5 other choreographers and all of these dancers and make this a 6-month thing. And she's really the reason that it grew so much. And part of that was because throughout the whole process, we just trusted each other. We said, here's the music. Do you feel anything with it? If so, go for it. And so that's really, when you trust each other as collaborators, that's when you get to get that next level of things. So there's one final example I want to talk about really quick. You've heard me mentioning my partner Christina a couple times through this presentation. So as a classical composer, I was trained and taught that classical music is written by one single genius composer who was born with all of the magical music gifts from the age of -3, and they get all the credit for everything that they did. This is not how it has ever worked, but Mozart had a biographer who wanted to sell copies, so that's why we all think those things. You can read it. I mean, it's literally like after he died, he had a biographer who was just like, well, if I make him be the Germanic hero's story, then we can sell a bunch of copies. So we've been working together for almost 14 years. For the first 10 years of that, we negotiated credit on every single piece we did together. It was like, this one, your name will be first because you did more. This one's mine. This one, you're the producer, but I'm the composer. This one, I'm the audio engineer, but you're this. So I'm going to show you a statistic that is not in any way representative of who's actually writing and producing music. Only 2% of credited music producers are female or female identified. 2. Like for every 48 me's, for every 98 me's, there are 2 Christinas. So about 5 years ago, after watching man after man take credit for Christina's ideas and think that they came up with them, which when you see it for 14 years, you notice it, I wanted to stop virtue signaling about promoting the contribution of women in the music industry and start being part of the solution. So since then, every piece of music we write together, we list the composers as Christina Giacona and Patrick Conlon. So I had to be, oh, thank you. It was very hard to not take credit for something someone else did. It's kind of part of, like the culture, it's the classical culture. So many wives were actually the orchestrators and co-composers of so many classical musicians. So I had to be willing to give something up for what I believed in. So if I actually wanted to do it, I needed to start with myself. with my writing partner by giving her credit for the work that she does. I need to give up the privilege of taking sole credit for work that I did with someone else. What I have found is that since making this change, I have not lost anything. I'm not thought up as less of a composer, I don't get less opportunities, I don't get any less credit for the work I do. In fact, I've found the opposite. When I am at my most open and least selfish, that's when I get to work on art with a community of artists like the ones I've mentioned in this presentation. So self-reflection, growth, and inclusivity is active, continuous work. Every project is different, every day is different. The only way to help is to do the work. I'm still working on me. Thank you for listening and giving me the space to share some of the incredible work my friends and collaborators are doing here in Oklahoma.